Why did you call him, Mommy? The question cut through everything I thought I knew about my life. My daughter Lily stood in the doorway of our new home, sunshine streaming through windows that actually opened without sticking, and I realized I had no simple answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that the most terrifying phone call she ever made saved both our lives? That the wrong number she dialed in panic led us to everything we never knew we needed? You know, people talk about karma like it's some cosmic scoreboard, tallying up your good deeds and bad choices, waiting to cash them all in at once. But I've learned karma isn't about what you deserve. It's about what breaks you open enough to let the right people in. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you're finally ready to receive, even when it arrives wrapped in danger and darkness. Hey, before I get too deep into this, how are you all doing today? Wherever you're watching this from, whether you're bundled up against the cold or enjoying some sunshine, I hope you're comfortable because once I start this story, you're going to want to hear every single word. Trust me on that. My name is Elena Carter. This is the story of how I went from a broke waitress getting beaten down by life every single day to a woman who finally understood what it meant to be protected, cherished, and loved by people who would burn the world down to keep me safe. If someone had told me 2 years ago that my daughter's terrified mistake would lead me to a man who could kill without blinking but who held her like she was made of glass, I would have laughed until I cried. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe. Leave a comment telling me if you've ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew just shattered. I read every single one. Now, let me start from the beginning, back when I still believed that working hard and keeping my head down would be enough. I was 29 years old when this all started, which feels both young and ancient depending on how you look at it. Young enough that I should have had dreams, old enough that mine had already died and been buried. I was raising Lily alone in a 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where the sirens never really stopped, working double shifts at a diner that smelled like grease and broken promises. I believed in a lot of stupid things back then. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, saved enough, smiled through enough harassment from customers who left prayer cards instead of tips, that eventually life would get easier. I believed that being a good mother meant sacrificing everything, that asking for help was weakness, that I could protect my daughter from the ugliness of the world just by loving her hard enough. I believed I was doing fine on my own. God, I was so naive. Lily was everything to me. Golden brown curls that tangled no matter how carefully I braided them, questions about everything, a laugh that made the cramped apartment feel less like a prison. She never complained about the toys I bought from thrift stores or the fact that her winter coat was 2 sizes too big, because I needed it to last. She drew pictures of us in a house with a garden and told me about the dog she'd named Pancake when we could finally afford one. I gave her everything I had. My time, my energy, every dollar that didn't go to keeping the lights on. I picked up extra shifts until my feet bled in my worn-out shoes. I smiled until my face hurt. I told her we were going to be fine, that Mommy had everything under control. That was my first real mistake, believing I had any control at all. The night it happened, I was working the closing shift at the diner. It was a Tuesday, which meant slow, which meant bad tips, which meant I stayed later cleaning to justify the hours to my manager. The cook had already left. I was alone in the back taking out trash when I heard the argument in the alley. 2 men. Voices sharp with anger. I should have gone back inside immediately, should have minded my business like everyone in that neighborhood learned to do. But one of them said something about a little girl, about making sure she didn't talk, and my hand was already on my phone, my mama bear instincts overriding common sense. I saw the gun. I saw the man fall. I saw the shooter's face clearly under the security light that flickered over the dumpster. And he saw me. I ran. God, I ran faster than I thought possible in those stupid non-slip shoes. Back through the kitchen, out the front, down 3 blocks before I even thought about where I was going. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Then another. Then another. They knew who I was. Of course they did. I'd been wearing my name tag. I made it home by some miracle, flying up those 4 flights of stairs, hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the lock. Lily was asleep. The neighbor's teenage daughter passed out on the couch with her headphones in. I paid her, sent her home, locked every lock on the door, and tried to figure out what to do. Who do you call when you witness a murder? The police? In that neighborhood, half of them were dirty. I'd seen enough to know that going to the cops could get you killed just as fast as staying silent. A lawyer? With what money? 911 felt both too extreme and not enough. I paced that tiny apartment until dawn, watching every car that slowed on the street below, jumping at every sound. When I finally convinced myself I was being paranoid, that maybe he hadn't actually seen my face clearly, that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, my phone rang. The voice was calm, professional. Elena Carter. 412 Maple Street, apartment 4B. You have a daughter, Lily. 8 years old. Franklin Elementary School. That's when I knew. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to make me disappear in a way that left no questions, no witnesses, and no little girl to tell tales. The line went dead. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was already gone. What I didn't know was that Lily had been awake, listening from her bedroom doorway, watching her mother fall apart. I didn't know that when I left for my shift the next evening, telling her I'd be home by midnight, she'd be sitting alone in the dark 4 hours later, terrified, with my old phone in her trembling hands. And I definitely didn't know that the number I'd saved under emergency 2 years ago, given to me by a customer who said to call if I ever needed anything, belonged to the most dangerous man in the city. That phone number came into my life 2 years before everything fell apart, and I'd almost forgotten about it completely. There was a regular customer at the diner, an older woman named Isabella who came in every Thursday afternoon like clockwork. She always sat in my section, always ordered the same thing: coffee black, wheat toast dry, poached eggs. She tipped exactly 20% and never made small talk until one Thursday when Lily's school called midshift to say she was sick, and I had to beg my manager to let me leave early. I was crying in the bathroom trying to figure out how I'd make rent if I lost this job, when Isabella walked in. She didn't offer empty comfort. She just handed me a business card with a phone number handwritten on the back. "My son," she said in this accent I couldn't quite place, elegant and old world. "If you ever need help, real help, the kind the police can't give you." I should have thrown it away. Should have recognized the warning in those words. But I was desperate and broke and drowning, so I saved it in my phone under emergency, and told myself I'd never be desperate enough to actually use it. I never saw Isabella again after that day. She stopped coming to the diner. I figured she'd moved or died or just found a better place for breakfast. The number sat in my phone for 2 years forgotten, until the night my daughter needed help and couldn't reach me. Let me tell you what happened that night from Lily's perspective, because she told me later. Every detail burned into her memory. I'd left for my shift at 5, kissing her forehead and promising I'd be home by midnight. Our neighbor's daughter Emma was supposed to watch her until 10. Then Lily knew the routine. Lock the door behind her, don't answer for anyone, call me if anything scary happens. But Emma left early. Her boyfriend texted and she just went, probably figuring an 8-year-old could handle 2 hours alone. Lily was fine at first. She did her homework, ate the dinner I'd left in the fridge, watched cartoons with the volume low like I'd taught her. Then the storm started. Thunder that shook our building's old frame. Lightning that made the lights flicker. The power went out around 9:30. Lily found the flashlight where I kept it, told herself she was brave, that mommy would be home soon. At 10:15 someone knocked on our door. Hard. Aggressive. A man's voice asking if Elena Carter was home. Lily stayed silent like I'd taught her, barely breathing in the dark. The knocking continued for 5 minutes that probably felt like hours to her. Then it stopped. She tried calling me. Straight to voicemail. My phone had died during my shift, something that happened constantly with that ancient battery. She tried 3 more times, each time getting more panicked. The storm was getting worse. She was alone in the dark. And men were looking for her mother. That's when she went through my contacts with shaking hands, scrolling past names of people who wouldn't answer or couldn't help, until she found it. Emergency. Just that one word. She pressed call before she could think about it. Meanwhile, across the city in a world I didn't know existed, Adrian Moretti was having a very different kind of night. He told me about it later, during one of those late nights when neither of us could sleep, and the truth just spilled out in the darkness. He'd been in his study, going over accounts for businesses I didn't understand yet, when a phone rang. Not his main cell. Not his business line. A phone that hadn't rung in 2 years. Not since his mother had given the number to some waitress she'd taken a liking to. He almost didn't answer. He'd assumed the woman had thrown the number away or lost it, that his mother's occasional soft spot for struggling people had been wasted like usual. But something made him pick up. Curiosity maybe. Boredom. Fate if you believe in that. What he heard was a child's voice, small and terrified. Barely audible over the storm in the background. Please help. My mommy's gone and there are bad men and I don't know what to do. Adrian said his first instinct was to hang up. He wasn't an emergency service. He wasn't anyone's hero. He'd built his life on clear lines, you're in his world or you're not, you're his problem or you're not. Some random kid calling his mother's old number wasn't his concern. But then Lily said something that changed everything. The lady said you help people when the police can't. Please. I'm scared. The lady. His mother. Isabella had given this number to the child's mother, which meant she'd seen something in her worth protecting. His mother's instincts were rarely wrong. And if there were bad men involved, if a child was in danger, that meant something specific in their world. What's your address? His voice was calm, controlled, nothing like what he was feeling. Lily stammered it out. 412 Maple Street. Apartment 4B. He knew that neighborhood. Knew what kind of people operated there. Knew that a child alone in the dark with men at her door had maybe hours before something very bad happened. Listen to me carefully, Adrian said. And Lily told me later that his voice made her feel safer even though she had no idea who he was. Lock yourself in the bathroom. Bring your phone. Don't open the door for anyone except your mother or me. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Can you do that? How will I know it's you? Smart kid. Adrian smiled despite himself. I'll knock 3 times, then twice, then once. Like a pattern. Can you remember that? 3, 2, 1. Good girl. Go now. The line went dead. Adrian was already moving, pulling on his jacket, checking the gun at his back, calling his head of security. Within 5 minutes he had a team mobilized and information coming in. Within 10, he knew about the murder in the alley. The witness who disappeared. The contract put out on a waitress named Elena Carter. Within 15 minutes he knew exactly where I was. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Let me back up to where I was during all of this. Because while my daughter was home alone calling strange men and Adrian was racing across the city, I was living my worst nightmare. I'd been grabbed leaving the diner after my shift. 2 men, professional and quick. A van. Duct tape. The kind of efficient kidnapping that told me these weren't amateurs. They drove for maybe 30 minutes, me struggling until one of them hit me hard enough that I tasted blood. Then I went limp. Conserving energy. Trying to think. They wanted to know what I'd seen. Who I'd told. I played dumb at first, said I didn't know what they were talking about, but they had photos. Me taking out the trash. Me running. They knew I'd witnessed the hit. Tell us who you've talked to and we'll make it quick, one of them said. He had a scar across his knuckles and bored eyes. Lie and we'll make sure your daughter goes into the system after we're done with you. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she disappears too. Depends on my mood. That's when I knew begging wouldn't work. These weren't men who responded to tears or appeals to their humanity. So I did the only thing I could think of. I got angry. You're going to kill me anyway, I said, spitting blood. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to do what you're going to do. But my daughter is at home with my neighbor, and if anything happens to me, she's going straight to the police with the recording I made. It was a complete bluff. I had no recording. But I said it with enough conviction that I saw doubt flicker across scarred Knuckles' face. She's lying, the other one said. Check her phone. Already dead. Battery. Scarred Knuckles held up my useless cell phone. But that doesn't mean she didn't upload something before it died. Social media, cloud storage, email to a lawyer. These single mothers always think they're so smart. They debated killing me immediately versus going to my apartment first to find the non-existent recording. I sat there in that abandoned warehouse, hands bound, face throbbing, and prayed to a God I hadn't talked to in years that Lily was asleep and safe and that whatever happened next, she'd be okay. I didn't know that at that exact moment, Adrian was standing in my apartment, looking down at my daughter who'd let him in after he'd knocked the pattern. 3-2-1. I didn't know he'd sent his team to track my phone's last location while he stayed with Lily. His dangerous face softened by something like concern as he asked her questions in that low, steady voice. I didn't know that when his phone buzzed with my location, he called his mother to come stay with Lily, refusing to leave her alone even though every minute counted. And I definitely didn't know that Isabella Moretti, the elegant old woman from the diner who'd given me that number 2 years ago, was about to walk back into my life in the most unexpected way possible. Adrian told me later what happened when his mother arrived at my apartment. She took one look at Lily, terrified, brave, clutching a stuffed rabbit, and something shifted in her face. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. She knelt down to Lily's level despite her expensive clothes and the dirty floor. "Your mama is very strong," Isabella said in that elegant accent. "And my son is going to bring her home. But while we wait, how about you tell me about this rabbit? Does he have a name?" Just like that, Lily started talking. And Isabella listened like she had all the time in the world, even though her son was about to start a war to save a woman he'd never met. That's the thing about the Morettis I'd learn. They didn't do anything halfway. Not kindness. Not violence. Not protection. Once you were theirs completely. I just didn't know yet that I was already theirs. That the moment Lily called that number, the moment Adrian heard her fear, the moment Isabella recognized my daughter's need, everything had already changed. The men holding me were still debating my fate when the warehouse door exploded inward. The warehouse door exploding inward wasn't a scene from a movie. It was chaos. Not the glorious Hollywood kind, but the raw, visceral shock of sudden, overwhelming violence. The two men holding me, scarred Knuckles and his bored companion, didn't have time to react. The air filled with shouts and the sharp, controlled sound of gunfire. I didn't see Adrian at first. I just saw the effect of his arrival. I was on the ground, zip-tied, staring at the floor when a pair of black, expensive leather boots skidded to a stop right next to my face. A large hand, covered in tattoos I barely registered, sliced through the plastic tie on my wrists with a small, terrifyingly sharp knife. "Get up," Adrian said. His voice was no longer steady. It was rough, demanding, full of the violence he'd just unleashed. He didn't look at me as he pulled me to my feet. His eyes were scanning the perimeter, assessing the threat. He had a gun in his other hand, held with a casual expertise that made my blood run cold. This wasn't a good Samaritan. This was a predator. We ran. Not toward the door, but through a maze of machinery and shadows toward a back entrance. He kept his body half in front of mine, shielding me with the casual authority of a man who didn't fear being shot. The adrenaline was so thick I could barely breathe. We got to a waiting black sedan, not the one he'd driven to my apartment, and were peeling away before the other side even had time to realize they'd lost their target. I didn't speak the entire drive to the compound. I was staring out the window, watching the familiar city lights blur into the darkness of the suburbs, then into the isolation of a massive, heavily guarded estate. He took me directly to a medical room. A quiet, efficient nurse patched the cut on my lip and checked me for concussion while Adrian stood in the doorway, talking low and fast on a secure phone, ignoring me completely now that the danger was over. That's when the reality of what he was, and what he had done, hit me. He had risked a war to save a woman he'd never met because a child had called his mother's old number. And now I was inside his walls. The first few days at the Moretti compound were the foundation of the deception. I was placed in a large, comfortable guest suite that felt more like a fortress than a home. Lily was brought to me the morning after the rescue. The sight of her safe, sleeping soundly in the massive bed, was the first time I felt human again. I was overwhelmed with guilt and gratitude. Guilt for putting her in danger, gratitude to the man who had pulled us out, Adrian was distant. He managed his empire from his study, only appearing for brief, intensely focused moments. He would check the security on my suite, ask if I needed anything with a formality that bordered on coldness, then disappear. He was a man drowning in responsibility, and I was the unexpected, dangerous cargo he had been forced to carry. I played the role perfectly. The terrified, grateful waitress. I had to. My real name, Victoria Bellini, and my former job as a federal witness protection agent were bombs I couldn't detonate in this environment. The men who had taken me were connected to the Vespoli syndicate, a known rival of the Morettas. But if Adrian found out I was a professional fugitive, the dynamic would change completely. He would see me as a threat, a liability, or worse, a double agent. I needed his protection, and the terrified, struggling mother was the only currency I had. The layers of deception started immediately. When Adrian asked me to detail everything I remembered about the murder, I edited my description. I kept out details only a trained observer would notice, focusing instead on my fear and the shooter's face. I built the relationship on a lie of shared trauma. Elena was the victim. Adrian was the protector. The pressure built when Isabella Moretti arrived. She didn't announce her visit. I was in the courtyard with Lily, enjoying the sunlight after days of confinement, when Isabella appeared from the main house. She was elegant in her late 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and the kind of quiet authority that made Adrian seem loud by comparison. This was the woman who gave me the number, the woman who had protected Lily. "Elena," she said, her accent rich and formal. "I am Isabella Moretti. It is a relief to see you whole." She immediately took charge. She didn't treat me like a guest or a refugee. She treated me like family who had been through a crisis. She brought Lily books and art supplies, making sure her routine stayed as normal as possible. Isabella became the central, vital supporting character. She saw the truth of my situation, the raw vulnerability of a mother, but she also saw the change in her son. One afternoon, I was helping her arrange flowers in the massive main hall, a pointless domestic task that felt oddly comforting. "You have fire, Elena," Isabella observed, trimming a rose stem with a silver knife. "My son needs that. He has been lost since his father, Marco, was killed." "I am just a waitress, Isabella," I said, leaning into the lie. "I just want to go home." Isabella stopped, looking directly at me. Her eyes held that wisdom that comes from seeing both love and ruin. "You cannot go home. And you are not just anything," she stated, cutting through my pretense. "You are why he is standing straighter. Adrian has been drifting into the darkness, becoming only the commander, since his father's death. But when he rushed to that warehouse, he wasn't saving his territory. He was saving a life. Yours. And Lily's. They are his salvation, Elena. He just doesn't know it yet." Her words were a stark warning and a profound layer of dramatic irony. I was his salvation, but I was also the greatest deception he had welcomed into his life. The deception became more elaborate. I was aware that my vulnerability was my greatest weapon. I let Adrian see the small moments. Me crying over Lily's bedtime story. Me scrubbing the floor of my bathroom because I couldn't stand being useless. I matched his plot obstacles, the increasing external danger from the Vespoli syndicate, with my own emotional vulnerability. The rising pressure intensified when Silas returned. Silas Kent, Adrian's lawyer and right hand, was still deeply suspicious. He was the only one who saw me as a liability, not a victim. He cornered me one evening by the library. "The Vespoli syndicate is not going to stop," Silas said, his voice low and professional. "You are too great a risk. Adrian is putting us all in danger for you. Do you understand the severity of this?" "I understand men died to save me," I countered, letting my voice shake just enough. "I am grateful." Silas didn't buy it. His eyes narrowed. He was looking for the cracks in my performance. "You were a witness to a murder. You're a single mother. You run." "That's the story," Silas said. "But you didn't cry when we rescued you. You didn't ask about your survival. You asked about your daughter's safety, as if you knew you were going to live." "Why, Elena?" Most people beg. You commanded. He had matched the plot obstacle, the internal questioning, with my deepest flaw, my inability to completely shed my training. I realized then that my relationship with Adrian's world was layered with blind spots. Adrian was blind because of his heart. Silas was blind because of his logic. Both were dangerous. The evidence of betrayal started accumulating. I needed to know the extent of Adrian's operation. I needed to know who his real enemies were and how deep their corruption ran, not just to keep Lily safe, but to understand if I could ever use my true identity again. One night, while Adrian was in a heated argument with Silas about strategy, I slipped into his study. I found a secure ledger detailing the flow of finances. It wasn't simple theft or extortion. It was massive, controlling the city's infrastructure from the shadows. Adrian was more than a mob boss. He was a parallel government. That's when I saw the name. Dominic Vespoli, the leader of the rival syndicate. And next to Dominic's name in the ledger, I saw a familiar set of initials, VB. The VB stood for Victoria Bellini. Me, my former witness protection boss, David Rossi, had used the Vespoli syndicate years ago to try and discredit the Rossi crime family. The entanglement was deeper than I ever knew. I wasn't just hiding from the Rossi family. I was hiding from the fallout of my own case, which implicated multiple organizations, including potentially Adrian's. I was trapped physically by Adrian's protection, and emotionally by his growing affection for Lily, and the fragile connection forming between us. He was sacrificing his assets to protect me. I was sacrificing my truth to survive him. The relationship was built on a sacrifice from both sides, but only one of us knew the full price of the deception. The mounting dread was suffocating. I knew the discovery moment was coming. The moment Adrian would realize I had given him a fake life story, while he was busy burning down his own world to keep the false version of me safe. The building tension culminated 2 weeks after the rescue. Adrian, in a rare moment of unguarded relief, brought me a gift. It was a simple silver locket for Lily. He found me in the kitchen making toast. He handed me the box, his expression unreadable. "She needs to know there are good things in the world, Elena," he said, avoiding eye contact. I opened the box. It was beautiful. Simple. "Thank you, Adrian," I managed. He looked at me, then truly looked. He saw past the waitress, past the victim, to the woman standing there. He took a step toward me, closing the physical distance that we had both maintained so rigidly. "Elena," he started, his voice a low rumble. "I need to know everything. Not about the murder. About you. Who are you really running from?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. I had to choose. Tell the truth and risk his wrath, or double down on the lie and risk losing everything when the truth inevitably came out. I took a breath. I gave him the lie. "I'm running from being poor Adrian," I whispered, meeting his gaze, letting the tears come, but only the real, frustrated ones. "I'm running from the kind of life where my daughter has to call a stranger because her mother is gone. That's all there is." He searched my face, and then slowly, agonizingly, he seemed to accept it. He reached out and gently brushed the hair back from my face. "Stay here," he said, his voice heavy with promise. "I'll make sure you never run again." He walked away, completely satisfied, believing he had uncovered my true, painful vulnerability. But I knew the reality. I had just succeeded in pushing him further into the deception. He had committed himself to protecting me, the waitress, the victim, and I had sacrificed his trust, securing my safety by denying him the one thing he valued most: control. The dread was overwhelming because I knew the true cost of my safety would be his complete devastation when the truth of Victoria Bellini finally surfaced. The devastation didn't arrive with a scream or a gunshot. It arrived quietly, through a compromised perspective, the way all true betrayal does. Adrian had walked away, convinced by the performance of the crying, grateful waitress. He had given me his promise, and I had accepted it, knowing that the promise was built on quicksand. That night I couldn't sleep. The guilt was a heavy physical thing. I was safe, Lily was happy, But I was building my security on the destruction of a man who, despite his violence, had shown me genuine kindness. I decided I needed to move fast. If I was going to leverage Adrian's protection to disappear permanently, I needed more than just his word. I needed to know the full extent of the war he was fighting, because the enemy was no longer just the Vespoli syndicate. The enemy was the past I had run from, the past that had now followed me right into Adrian's fortress. I knew Adrian was distracted with the growing aggression from Dominic Vespoli. He was running multiple tension threads at once, securing his assets, finding the leak in his organization, and trying to manage the external war. This was my window. I slipped out of my suite early in the morning, using the limited knowledge of the compound's layout I had acquired from Isabella. I bypassed the internal security cameras by walking along the walls and using the blind spots I'd marked days ago. My years as Victoria Bellini, a professional operative, had made navigating complex security systems second nature. The waitress facade was heavy, but the agent was still sharp. I made it to Adrian's study. I wasn't looking for a gun or money. I was looking for the secure files, the digital evidence that would expose the linkages between the various organizations I'd been running, from Rossi, Vespoli, and now Moretti. I found his main computer locked down, but the large safe behind the hidden bookcase wasn't for cash. It was for documents. I used the combination I'd seen Adrian punch in 2 weeks ago, playing the naive victim. He hadn't bothered to change it. Why would he? He was entirely focused on the external threat. Inside the safe, I found financial records, old photographs, and a sealed manila envelope labeled in Silas Kent's precise handwriting. Vivi due diligence. The storytelling perspective shattered in that instant. Adrian had known, or at least his trusted lawyer had known, and had given him the file. I pulled out the contents. It wasn't a dossier on Elena Carter. It was a comprehensive file on Victoria Bellini. Every detail was there: my time with federal witness protection, the collapse of the Rossi case, the reason I ran, and the specific organizations I was running from. There were photos of me from 8 years ago, looking younger, harder, standing next to my old boss, David Rossi. The file confirmed the destruction. Silas had told Adrian the truth, or Adrian had figured it out, perhaps days ago. He had known I was lying, not just about my job, but about the profound danger I carried. He had listened to my performance in the kitchen, the one where I wept about being poor and a victim, and he had let me continue the deception. The midpoint devastation wasn't just finding the file. It was realizing Adrian had stripped me of all emotional support systems by choosing to play along. He had let me believe my lie was working, forcing me into greater emotional debt, while knowing my every secret. I quickly flipped through the remaining documents. Then I saw it. The piece of evidence that linked everything together and stripped me of the last piece of innocence I could claim. It was an old, faded photograph. A group shot. Adrian, younger, his face less hardened, standing next to his father, Marco Moretti. And next to Marco, smiling broadly, was my old boss, David Rossi. The caption underneath was dated from 10 years prior. Marco and David celebrating the new partnership. My brain scrambled to process the exposition. The Rossi crime family, the people I had been sent to testify against, the reason I had gone into hiding and changed my name, they were partners with the Moretti organization. The betrayal wasn't just romantic or personal. It was systemic. Adrian hadn't saved me out of kindness. He had saved me because I was an explosive secret linked to his family's dark history. He wasn't the protector. He was the next layer of the trap. I had run from one dangerous organization and landed directly in the lap of their longtime allies. The discovery destroyed the deepest character relationship, the fragile, nascent trust that had been built on Lily's innocence and Adrian's protection. I wasn't a victim to him anymore. I was a professional problem that he was managing. As I stared at the photo, the door to the study opened. It wasn't Adrian. It was Isabella Moretti. She looked at me, then at the open safe, and then at the files scattered across Adrian's desk, my photograph visible on top. There was no anger in her eyes, only a profound, devastating sadness. "I had hoped," Isabella said, her voice barely a whisper, "that you would choose to tell him yourself." She had known the truth all along. The elegant woman from the diner, the one who had comforted Lily and spoken of salvation, was the quiet matriarch who had recognized my operative eyes from the start. She was the one who had given me the number, knowing exactly who she was sending me to. "You knew I was Victoria Bellini," I accused, my voice shaking. "You sent me here." "I knew you were a woman who ran from a terrible danger," Isabella corrected, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "I knew you were strong enough to survive what was coming. And I knew Adrian needed someone who wasn't afraid of him. You are right, my son is complicated. But he is a good man, Elena. He saved you because of Lily's call, and when Silas brought him the truth about Victoria Bellini, he still chose to keep you safe." "Why?" I demanded, pointing at the photograph of Marco Moretti and David Rossi. "This is why. His family is in bed with the people who would kill me." Isabella walked to the desk, her expression unyielding. "Marco was a good man who was loyal to the wrong people," she stated, confirming the painful truth. "And David Rossi betrayed him. He betrayed all of us." Marco's murder was sanctioned by the Rossi family, who then pinned it on an internal rival to maintain their relationship with Vespoli. The partnership was already collapsing when Marco was killed. The destruction was complete. I realized my former colleagues were as corrupt as the criminals they hunted. My boss had been a murderer, and my protection program was a lie. I was stripped of all professional support systems. Isabella laid her hand on the photograph. "Adrian has spent the last 8 years cleaning up his father's mess and trying to extract the Moretti name from the control of the Rossi family. He is not their ally, Elena. He is their target. And now you are too." She looked straight at me, her eyes imploring. "He lost everything when Marco died. Do not make him lose his trust in you, or in what you represent to his life. Do not let the lie of Elena Carter destroy the truth of Victoria Bellini." I had to choose. I could finish gathering evidence and disappear again, proving I was just the ruthless agent Adrian suspected. Or I could stop running and trust the woman who had already saved my daughter once. But the choice was taken from me. Before I could answer, the security alarm blared. A single shrill, urgent tone. Isabella's face went white. She grabbed the phone on Adrian's desk, her fingers flying across the speed dial. "They're here," she breathed, looking toward the window. "Vespoli and Rossi. They came together." "How?" I whispered, scrambling to pick up the spilled files. "The phone," Isabella said, her voice strained. "The burner phone you used to call your old colleague last night, the one you thought was secure. They must have tracked the signal the moment you activated it." I realized my final act of deception, the small private communication to try and plan my escape, had been the signal that brought the entire structure down. My attempt to protect myself had just brought the full force of 2 rival organizations, led by 2 men who wanted me dead, directly to the compound. And I had compromised Adrian's defenses from the inside. The overwhelming feeling was desperation. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the catastrophic event. And I had dragged an innocent child and the man who loved her into the path of a war that I had started 8 years ago. The deepest devastation wasn't the proof of Adrian's family betrayal. It was the proof of my own. The security alarm wasn't just a sound. It was the sound of my life collapsing. The culmination of every deception I had carefully constructed. My attempt to plan a quiet exit had become the catalyst for disaster. Isabella was already moving. She was the comm center in the storm I had brought upon them. She grabbed the encrypted emergency satellite phone from the safe and shoved the Victoria Bellini file back inside. "We have minutes, Elena," she commanded, her voice steel, not the elegant tone I was used to. "Lily. She is the priority. My people will cover the perimeter, but we need to use the emergency tunnels. They are secure, but they lead far from here." The tunnels. I felt useless, the trained agent momentarily paralyzed by the sheer scope of the disaster. "They were built by my husband's father for situations exactly like this," Isabella explained, already halfway to the door. "Go to the nursery. Get Lily. Do not stop for anything." I didn't argue. I raced down the hallway, the sound of glass shattering in the distance confirming the speed and brutality of the dual assault. Vespoli and Rossi had come together. A perfect storm of Adrian's old enemies and my old life. I found Lily wide awake in her room, sitting up in bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She wasn't crying. She was terrified but calm. She had inherited my survival instincts. "Mommy," she whispered. "Bad men are here." "I know, baby," I said, sweeping her into my arms. "It's time for a surprise adventure. We're going to play hide and seek in a very long tunnel." We made it back to the main hallway just as Adrian burst in, covered in grime and blood that wasn't his. He was leading 2 of his security men. His face was a mask of cold fury, but when his eyes found mine, the fury was replaced by a look of profound, agonizing betrayal. He saw the files on the desk, the open safe, and he knew. He knew I was Victoria Bellini, that I had used the lie, and that my secret escape plan had just brought the entire war to his doorstep. There was no time for confrontation. The gunfire was too close. "Silas is securing the south wing," Adrian barked, his voice ragged. "Isabella, take the girl and the woman through the conduit now. The main tunnels are already compromised. Go to the coastal safe house. It's unmarked." Isabella didn't hesitate. She took Lily from my arms. "Come, little one. We have a long drive ahead." But Adrian stopped me with a hand on my arm. His grip was tight, his strength overwhelming. "You don't go with them, Victoria," he stated, using my real name for the first time. The sound was a hammer blow. "What?" My heart seized. "Adrian, you can't. If I go back, they'll find her. Lily needs me." "Lily needs to survive," he countered, his eyes hard and completely devoid of the warmth he had shown just hours earlier. "And the woman they are looking for is you. Not Elena Carter, the waitress. Victoria Bellini, the agent who brought this down on us. If they find you with them, they have both. If they find you here, they believe the fight is here." His logic was brutal, absolute, and impossible to argue with. I was the bait. I was the reason they were here. If I was separated from Lily and Isabella, Lily had a chance to vanish completely. If I stayed, Adrian could contain the disaster I had started. "You have 30 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't destroy everything you've ever loved." The memory of my old opening line mocked me. Adrian was giving me the choice. Stay broken or fight back alone. I looked at Lily, whose small face was pressed against Isabella's shoulder, watching me. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, accepting the terrible choice. This was my penance for the lie. "Go," I told Isabella, pushing them toward the hidden passage. "Keep her safe." Isabella looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "He will find you, Elena. Stay alive." She and Lily disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel entrance. The loss of Lily was the first rock bottom. My daughter was safe, but she was gone from me, taken away to a place I didn't know, by a man who now knew I was a liar. I had lost the one person I had risked everything for. Adrian dragged me back through the chaos, not with care, but with the ruthless efficiency of a commanding officer moving a crucial asset. We descended into the control center, a bunker deep beneath the house. "The coastal house is secure, but you won't know the access code," Adrian said, pushing me onto a metal chair and securing my hands behind my back with a plastic tie. "Not an enemy, but a necessary precaution. You're not leaving until this is over. And then we talk about the full depth of your operation." The pressure cooker intensified. The screen above us showed the compound being systematically overwhelmed. The Vespoli and Rossi forces were too many, too well coordinated. Adrian, standing over a map, was managing the retreat, but the inner struggles mirrored the plot disasters. He was choosing to protect my daughter, despite my betrayal, because of his promise to his mother and perhaps a remnant of what he had felt for the waitress. But he was doing it with a cold, terrifying detachment. "You destroyed 8 years of work, Victoria," he said, his back to me. "I was 1 month away from forcing the Rossi family out of the market completely. You just gave them the leverage to take everything back." "I didn't know your father was allied with them," I pleaded, the desperation raw in my throat. I didn't know Rossi was a traitor. I thought you were just a mob boss, Adrian. I thought I was using you for protection. He finally turned, his eyes burning with an icy rage. You took my kindness, you weaponized my mother's sympathy, and you gambled with my child's safety. He hissed, the words laced with profound pain. You made me choose between my family's survival and the life of a waitress. You weren't honest about a name. You were a professional deception, and you used the only thing I valued, Lily's trust, against me. The loss of trust was complete. He had lost his control, his empire, and the one vulnerable connection he had allowed himself to build. This was my financial and emotional devastation. The man who had been my sanctuary now saw me as the enemy's silent partner. Minutes later, the compound alarm died. Silence followed the chaos, a heavy, oppressive blanket that was infinitely worse than the noise. They've broken through the inner defense, one of the remaining security officers reported, pale-faced. They're sweeping the house. Adrian looked at the officer, then at me. He had a choice. Retreat and save himself or stay and fight a lost battle. He chose the third, most dangerous option. I need to give them a distraction, Adrian decided, strapping a vest of extra magazines to his chest. I need to buy Isabella time to get to the coast. He didn't look at me as he spoke his final chilling instruction. If I don't come back, I need you to do something for me, Victoria. You know where the emergency hard drive is hidden in the wall. You know how to bypass the firewalls. You need to take the evidence and make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. It contains everything on Vespoli, Rossi, and the corrupt officials they control. If they get it, they control the city. He was forcing me to choose between remaining the victim and stepping back into the role of the agent, even in his service. He was risking his life to protect the safe passage of the daughter I had lied to him about, and in exchange, he demanded I take on the impossible task of securing his legacy. He pulled a key from his pocket and tossed it onto the floor, directly in front of my chair. It was the key to my restraints. The front door of this bunker locks automatically when I leave, he said, pulling the lever to open the heavy steel door. You have 20 minutes before they breach the control room. You can take the key, escape through the secondary tunnel, and disappear again, saving yourself. He looked at me one last time, a ghost of the man who had brought me soup days ago. Or you can secure the evidence, which will make you the #1 target for everyone left standing. You can stay the victim or you can become the protector. It's your impossible choice, Victoria. He stepped through the door, and the heavy metal slammed shut with a deafening final sound, leaving me completely alone in the darkness. I was physically trapped, isolated from my support system, with my hands restrained, staring at the key on the cold floor. I was at rock bottom. I had lost Lily, I had destroyed Adrian's life, and now my only path to survival lay through taking the last piece of evidence he held, making me the most hunted woman in the country. The loss was absolute. The 20-minute clock had started ticking. The heavy steel door had slammed shut, the sound echoing the finality of my devastation. I was alone in the darkness of the bunker, my hands secured behind the metal chair, staring at the key on the cold concrete floor. 20 minutes. That was all the time Adrian had bought me, risking his life above ground to secure Isabella and Lily's escape. The air in the bunker felt thick with moral anguish. Adrian had left me two options, and both required me to accept the full, devastating reality of Victoria Bellini. Option 1. Use the key, unlock the plastic restraints, and escape through the secondary tunnel. I could be on a plane by dawn, disappear completely, and save myself. I would remain the victim, the runner, the professional deception, but I would be alive. Option 2. Secure the emergency hard drive. The drive contained the lifeblood of Adrian's war, the evidence on Vespoli, Rossi, and the corrupt officials they controlled. Taking it meant stepping back into the fire, becoming the target of every dark organization in the city, but it also meant saving not just Adrian's legacy, but potentially Lily's future from the systemic corruption I had helped create. For a long minute I stared at the key. My hands were already chafed and numb from the plastic tie. The simple, seductive urge to escape, To return to the isolation I knew was overwhelming. Go, Victoria. Save yourself. You owe him nothing. He used you too. But then an image flashed in my mind. Lily's face pressed against Isabella's shoulder, trusting me to make the right choice. And another image. Adrian's face completely stripped of composure, the profound pain in his eyes when he spoke my real name. He had known the truth, and yet he had chosen to secure my daughter's safety first. He had used the lie of the waitress to protect the truth of the mother. The transformation catalyst hit me not as a moment of sudden strength, but as a grinding, visceral acceptance of my responsibility. I had broken his life. Now I had to fix it, not for him, but for the principle of justice I had abandoned 8 years ago. I had hidden in shame. It was time to stand in truth. I had to become the victor. My mind, the one trained to analyze threat levels and tactical retreats, locked back into gear. I leaned forward, straining my arms against the restraints, slowly inching the chair toward the key. The metal scraped agonizingly on the concrete. I was shaking, not from fear, but from the immense physical effort required to move my body while bound. Every inch was a fight against the shame and despair of Act 6. Finally, the heel of my boot snagged the key. I managed to flip it with my foot, then strain again, using the edge of the chair leg to push it up until I could clamp it between the soles of my shoes. It was clumsy, painful, and terrifyingly slow. But I did it. With the key pressed firmly, I twisted my bound wrists, maneuvering the plastic tie until the lock aligned with the key's edge. A small, painful click. My hands fell forward, shaking, the skin red and raw. I didn't take the time to rub them out. I grabbed the key, pocketed it, and immediately went to the hidden compartment Adrian had mentioned. It was behind a loose panel in the wall, perfectly disguised. I peeled it back and found the emergency hard drive, a small rugged device. This was the point of no return. By touching this drive, I was signing a new contract, not with Adrian but with the fight itself. The evidence contained the proof of my old life's failure, the corruption that had led to the murder of Adrian's father and the destruction of my career. My true strength wasn't just my professional skill. It was the hidden skill of understanding this world. I knew how to use this drive. I knew how to use the web of betrayal to untangle the truth. I plugged the hard drive into the bunker's secure terminal. The screen glowed, illuminating the control room. I bypassed the triple-layered firewalls with a skill that was pure Victoria Bellini. The data poured onto the screen. Bank transactions, encrypted communications, locations of safe houses, and most crucially, a complete, unedited audio recording. The recording was labeled Final Meeting. Marco Moretti, Adrian's father. I started the playback, keeping the volume low. It wasn't a business meeting. It was a confrontation. Marco Moretti's voice, rough and determined, argued with 2 other men. One was David Rossi, my old boss. The other was Dominic Vespoli. The audio was devastating. It proved Isabella's earlier revelation. Marco Moretti was trying to cut ties with both of them. He was trying to go legitimate. You think I will let you bring that kind of violence into my city? Marco's voice was strained. I built this for my son, not for a bloodbath. Then David Rossi's voice, the voice of the man who had preached justice to me for years, came through, cold and final. You leave the table, Marco, you lose everything. You think your son can handle the cleanup? We will ensure he cannot. The final sounds were sickening. A struggle, 2 quick, muffled shots, and the crash of a chair. The rock bottom was complete. Not only did I know the identity of Adrian's father's killer, David Rossi, but I knew that my entire career, my entire raison d'etre for running, had been a calculated lie constructed by the man who had murdered Adrian's father. My life wasn't just a failure. It was a weapon used against the man who had saved my child. The choice was clear. The impossible choice was no longer about escape. It was about defining justice. Stay silent and let the murder stand, or use this recording and this evidence to bring down the men who had ruined both our families. I became the victor in that instant. I quickly created secure, encrypted copies of the most damaging evidence. The audio of the murder, the financial transfers linking Rossi to Vespoli, and the list of corrupt officials. I couldn't just leave the bunker. Adrian had risked his life to draw the fire here. I had to use the location to my advantage. I found a secondary radio transmitter, designed for long-range emergency communication. It was the catalyst for the climactic confrontation. I had the truth, but I needed the public stage. I looked at the console map. The main house was now quiet. Too quiet. Adrian's distraction had worked, but it had ended. He was likely captured or worse. I keyed the microphone on the emergency transmitter. My voice, when it came out, was no longer Elena Carter's terrified whisper. It was Victoria Bellini's clear, commanding cadence. "This is Victoria Bellini," I broadcast, knowing the message would be picked up by police scanners, local news outlets, and every private frequency operated by the Rossi and Vespoli organizations. "I am currently at the Moretti compound. I have the unedited recordings detailing the murder of Marco Moretti, along with the financial records of the partnership between David Rossi and Dominic Vespoli." I paused, letting the message sink in. "The evidence is being encrypted and will be released globally in 30 minutes. If you want it, you have one chance. Meet me at the old rail yard on the coast, the one marked for demolition. I'm trading the evidence for one thing: the immediate release of Adrian Moretti." I signed off. The message was out. I had made the impossible choice. I had accepted the truth of my betrayal, found the hidden strength to fight, and used Adrian's vulnerability as leverage to create the necessary confrontation. I was no longer running. I was hunting. I picked up a large, heavy flashlight and walked toward the secondary tunnel entrance, not for escape, but for the rendezvous that would determine the fate of all our lives. Hope had emerged from despair, but it was a cold, hard hope built entirely on determination and the promise of public truth. The old rail yard was the perfect stage for the climactic confrontation. It was a sprawling skeletal ruin on the edge of the coast, marked for demolition. A place where things were meant to be destroyed, not rebuilt. Rain had started again, falling in sheets over the rusting cranes and abandoned tracks. The air smelled of salt and decay. I emerged from the secondary tunnel 20 minutes after sending the broadcast. I was armed only with a heavy flashlight, the encrypted hard drive taped securely to my back, and the knowledge that I was stepping into a meat grinder. I didn't have to wait long. Two large, armored SUVs, unmarked but instantly recognizable as the vehicles of high-level organized crime, squealed to a halt on the wet concrete. From the first SUV, Dominic Vespoli emerged. He was sharp, surgically precise in his movements, accompanied by three heavily armed men. From the second SUV came David Rossi, my former boss, the man who had murdered Adrian's father. Rossi was older now, but his face still held the same deceptive benevolence, the perfect mask for a traitor. He looked furious, not panicked. "Victoria Bellini," Rossi said, his voice carrying easily across the rail yard. He used my real name like an insult. "Still running your mouth." I should have known Elena Carter was too weak to testify effectively, but Victoria Bellini? Always the dramatics. "The dramatics save lives, David," I countered, stepping out from the shadow of a large cargo container. I made sure they could see I was alone, unarmed, and holding nothing but my position. "I'm not here to testify. I'm here to trade." Vespoli scoffed, pulling a long, silenced handgun from his coat. "The Moretti boy is waiting in the car. We found him unconscious in the bunker entrance. He put up a good fight for a dead man's son. Now give us the drive. You are not walking out of here, Agent Bellini." "We'll see about that," I said. "You want the recordings detailing the murder of Marco Moretti? You want the financial records that link your organizations and expose every corrupt official you own? The price is Adrian Moretti, immediately and untouched." Rossi stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "You think you have leverage? You're exposed, Victoria. We just need to take you back and we have the drive and the witness. You're desperate." "I'm determined," I corrected. "And I'm not the only one here. Look around, gentlemen." My true advantage wasn't a weapon. It was the public truth-telling. I had sent the broadcast on multiple unencrypted frequencies. The sound of sirens, faint but unmistakable, began to cut through the rain and the coastal gloom. The local police were on their way, drawn by the emergency signal and the mention of the Moretti name. Rossi and Vespoli exchanged a look of pure shock. They were used to operating in the shadows, not under the scrutiny of the city's police. "He's stalling," Vespoli growled, raising his weapon toward me. Before he could pull the trigger, the back door of the second SUV opened. Adrian Moretti stumbled out. He was bruised, bleeding from a cut above his eye, but he was alive. He wasn't escorted out by his captors. He was forcing his way out, driven by pure instinct. He saw me, alone and exposed, and the antagonist's shock at who the protagonist had become was absolute. He didn't see the helpless waitress. He saw the agent who had just set a public trap using his life as bait. "Victoria, what did you do?" he yelled, his voice rough with pain and anger. I ignored him, locking eyes with Rossi. "The drive is encrypted, David. Only I have the key. If I don't initiate the release in the next 5 minutes, the entire package goes public globally on a time delay, linking you and Vespoli directly to Marco's murder, the money laundering, and the corrupt judges. It's an undeniable digital footprint." I pulled out the emergency satellite phone I had secreted in the waistband of my ruined skirt, holding it up like a trigger. "Adrian is the trade. Let him go." Vespoli aimed his gun at Adrian. "The boy dies first." Rossi, the calmer manipulator, put a restraining hand on Vespoli's arm. "No. The boy is worth nothing without the evidence. Adrian, you stay put. You let the girl hand over the drive, or your mother and the child are next." That was the truth bomb. They didn't know Isabella and Lily were safe at the coastal house. They were still playing the power game, unaware that the real victory had already been secured. Adrian looked at me, his eyes wide with sudden realization. He was battered, but his mind was clear. He realized I hadn't just run. I had secured the most precious cargo, his family, and then returned to fight his war. "Rossi," Adrian said, his voice surprisingly steady, even though he swayed slightly, "you killed my father. You used a partnership to execute him. And you framed an innocent man for it." Rossi sneered. "Your father was weak. Just like you, Adrian. Too soft for business." "He was trying to get out," I interjected, looking at Adrian. "He was going legitimate. I have the audio, Adrian. David Rossi killed your father. Vespoli was his witness." This was the core climactic moment. The truth of his father's murder, the betrayal by his father's friend, being revealed not in private, but in front of the killers themselves, seconds before a public spectacle. The feeling of vindication was sharp and clean. Adrian didn't look at Rossi or Vespoli. He looked at me, the deception finally stripped away, leaving only the complicated truth. He saw the agent who had saved his family and risked her life to give him justice. "Give them the drive, Victoria," Adrian ordered, his voice suddenly commanding. "Do not risk the package. I'm not worth it." "You are worth everything, Adrian," I replied, the truth of my feelings spilling out in the face of imminent death. Just as Vespoli lost patience and fired a warning shot that ripped past my ear, the sirens grew louder, closer. The police were here. "Now!" Rossi screamed at his men. "Get the boy, grab the drive." Chaos erupted. Vespoli's men surged forward. Adrian didn't run to the cars. He ran toward me, tackling me behind the cover of a massive rusted anchor, shielding me from the incoming fire. "You idiot!" he growled, clutching the wound in his side. "You should have run." "I don't run anymore," I gasped, pulling the hard drive free of the tape. I didn't hand it over. Instead, I activated the satellite phone. It was pre-programmed. I didn't need the key. I hit the single send button. "The evidence is gone," I yelled over the gunfire, holding the empty phone in the air. "It's public. Global. You lose, David. You lose everything." The police cars skidded into the rail yard moments later, their lights flashing blue and red, casting a dizzying, frantic spectacle over the confrontation. The sudden presence of official authority caused Rossi and Vespoli's men to scatter, their internal conflict instantly shifting to survival. The public humiliation of the antagonists was total. Rossi, the seemingly respected businessman, was caught red-handed with a killer, surrounded by their own armed men, and implicated in a major murder and corruption scandal that was now hitting the digital airwaves. As Adrian bled beside me, clutching my hand, the police swarmed the area. I watched as Rossi was cuffed, his mask of composure finally cracking into pure impotent rage. Vespoli's men, trying to retreat, were cut off by tactical units that Adrian must have placed on the perimeter as a last-ditch defense. The sound of the sirens, the blinding police lights, and the chaos of the arrests felt like the definitive end to the storm that had started with a child's broken call. Adrian was immediately transported to a secure hospital for emergency surgery. I went with him, refusing to leave his side, finally stepping out of the shadows and into the stark, uncompromising light of reality. The immediate consequences for the antagonists were swift and brutal. The evidence, the Marco Moretti murder audio, the financial records, and the detailed breakdown of the corruption network, was irrefutable. It had gone public the moment I hit send, ensuring that even if the local police tried to suppress it, the federal agencies would be forced to step in. David Rossi and Dominic Vespoli were both arraigned on multiple counts, including first-degree murder, racketeering, and conspiracy. Their reputations were not just ruined, they were annihilated. The organizations they controlled, already weakened by the simultaneous assault on the compound and the public exposure of their internal corruption, began to unravel overnight. Their assets were frozen, their allies turned informant, and the power they had wielded for decades was reduced to dust and headlines. While the legal process was lengthy, the outcome was guaranteed. Adrian's painful legacy of betrayal was finally avenged, and the threat that had forced me into hiding as Elena Carter was permanently neutralized. Adrian's recovery was difficult, a physical journey mirroring his emotional one. He woke up 2 days later, pale and weak, with Isabella Moretti sitting quietly at his bedside. I was sitting on the other side. He looked at me first, and I saw no anger, only a lingering question. "Victoria," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You didn't run." "I don't run," I confirmed, gently brushing the hair back from his forehead. "I'm sorry I lied about who I was, Adrian. But every time I said I was scared for Lily, that was the truth." "I know," he said, closing his eyes briefly. "Silas explained everything. He said you gave me the chance to be a protector, not just a commander. You gave me the one thing I needed most, justice for my father." Isabella, the quiet force who had started it all, finally spoke. "It wasn't a choice between a waitress and an agent, Adrian. It was a choice between a lie and the truth. She chose the truth, and she saved us all." The protagonist's triumph wasn't the external victory over the syndicates. It was the internal growth, the acceptance of the messy, complicated truth of who we both were. Adrian made a commitment in that hospital room. He decided he was done with the shadows. The remnants of the Moretti organization, the legitimate businesses built on the back of his father's empire, were liquidated or converted into transparent, clean enterprises. He used his immense, inherited resources to fund initiatives that would actually help the city, focusing on the communities his father had neglected or exploited. Months later, we were living in a small, beautiful home on the coast, the place Isabella had first taken Lily. It was quiet, filled with sunlight, and surrounded by a garden Lily had insisted on. Adrian, now out of the life and out of the hospital, put his formidable mechanical and logistical skills to use. He opened a successful auto garage that focused on hiring and training ex-convicts, men who wanted the same second chance he was taking. He was building something new, a reputation not of fear but of fairness and redemption. I didn't return to federal work. That life was poisoned by David Rossi's betrayal. Instead, I went back to school and began teaching again, working with children like Lily who needed structure and stability. Lily was thriving. Her golden brown curls shone in the sun, and she painted pictures in the backyard, no longer of imaginary houses, but of our actual home with Adrian, Isabella, and a ridiculously shaggy rescue dog she had named Pancake. Our new relationship was secure, built not on necessity or lies, but on the foundation of shared danger and brutal honesty. My final reflection on this entire journey is simple. I had spent my life believing strength meant independence, isolation, and control. I had to lose everything, my home, my identity, my security, to realize that true strength is vulnerability. It's the ability to trust the right people, even when they come wrapped in darkness and tattoos. I am filled with gratitude for the devastating path that led me here, recognition for the growth that allowed me to stop running, and a profound sense of peace with the woman I am finally allowed to be, Victoria Bellini, who sometimes goes by Elena Carter, and who is finally home. The journey was worth the cost. Now, as I wrap this story up, I want to thank every single one of you for being here and listening to this wild ride. I hope you were as hooked as I was living it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between running and fighting, please hit that like button and subscribe. Sharing this story with someone you know who needs to hear about finding hope in the darkest place would mean the world to me. Tell me in the comments, what was the moment you realized Victoria was done running? This is just the beginning of a new chapter, and I can't wait to share more stories of transformation, redemption, and impossible love with you all. I hope you'll stick around for the next one.